The speech of the Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte for the confidence of the government of change. The speech of the Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte for the confidence of the government of change. Author of Movimento 5 Stelle. Below are the official statements, in full format, of the President of the Council Giuseppe Conte today in the Senate, for the confidence in the government of change. Madam President, Honourable Members and Honourable Members. I wish first of all to greet the President of the Republic, who represents national unity and who accompanied the first, not easy, phases of formation of this government. Entering for the first time in this hall and talking to you today, I feel a heavy responsibility for what this place represents. It preserves the memory of many significant passages of our institutional. But the best way we have today to honor this noble tradition is to offer concrete answers to the needs of citizens. The growing disaffection towards the institutions, the progressive loss of prestige of those who have the honor of holding offices within them must push us all to a supplement of responsibility that necessarily passes through a greater openness towards the real instances that come from those who live out of these buildings. The role and authority of government and parliament cannot be based exclusively on the very high tasks assigned to them by our fundamental charter, but must be conquered day by day, working with discipline and honor, putting aside personal conveniences and demonstrating deserve such burdensome responsibilities. The contract. With this spirit and this awareness, today we present ourselves to you to ask for the trust in favor of not only a government team, but also a project for the change of Italy. A project that was formalized in the form of a contract by the two political forces that form the parliamentary majority, composed of the electoral programs presented in the elections and voted by the majority of Italians, as well as further legitimized by the votes the two political forces called respective members and supporters. The government program, whose contents even those who speak to you have shared, even in a discreet way, since the phase of its elaboration, is therefore strong of a double legitimation, formal and substantial. The objectives that our government team promises to reach are entrusted to the written page, because the political forces that make up the majority have declared them in a transparent way, binding themselves to take all the initiatives and measures necessary to pursue them. Only once the contents of the contract have been finalized, both political forces, following the vicissitudes that we know well, have decided, by mutual agreement, to propose to the head of state my name to assume the leadership of the government. I am grateful to those who, by renouncing legitimate personal ambitions, have been able to put in front of all the general interest, for a project that exceeds the people called to carry it forward, and which makes me feel even more intensely the responsibility that I assumed, well aware of the prerogatives that the Art. 95 of the Constitution assigns to the President of the Council of Ministers. As is known, I do not have previous political experiences. I am a citizen who, by virtue of the experience of study and professional matured, has declared himself available, during the election campaign, to assume possible responsibilities of government with one of the two political forces and, subsequently, to accept the task of forming and directing the government, also being the guarantor of the implementation of the contract for the government of change. I assume this task with humility, but also with determination, with the awareness of my limits, but also with the passion and self-denial of those who understand the weight of the high responsibilities that are entrusted to him. I am not moved by anything other than a spirit of service. I am deeply honored to be able to offer my commitment and my skills to defend the interests of the citizens of this wonderful country. As I have already anticipated, I propose to you and, through you, to the citizens, as the lawyer who will protect the interests of the Italian people. Change. Someone has considered these changes in terms of a clear break with the institutional practices that have accompanied the history of the Republic, almost an attack on the unwritten conventions that have characterized the ordinary institutional path of our country. All true. I will say more. I do not think this is a simple novelty. The truth is that we have made a radical change of which we are proud of, compared to practices that included assessments exchanged in conciliation between political leaders, mostly focused on the allocation of personal roles and very little about the contents of the program. We inaugurate a new season, not hiding the difficulties and mutual renunciations, in the sign of transparency and clarity towards the voters. Presenting itself today in the sign of change is not, therefore, a rhetorical or propaganda expression, but a choice based on the need to open up to the new wind that has been blowing for some time in the country and produced at the end of the last March 4 political elections. A geography of completely unprecedented political consensus. Old and new political categories. There are no longer political forces that express, as in the past, complex visions of the world, which inspire their action, that is to say, on the basis of perfectly identifiable ideological systems. The decline of strong ideologies dates back to decades and is shown by the fact that the last governments have promoted political initiatives that are difficult to place according to the more traditional political categories. The contract laid at the foundation of our government was judged, depending on the point of view, right or left. We respect those who wanted to carry out these analyses, but we can only point out their inadequacy, the inability to understand the deep needs that come from the country. Personally, I consider it more profitable to distinguish between political guidelines on the basis of the intensity of the recognition of human rights and fundamental freedoms. It is true that we want to claim, for government action, new evaluation criteria. We pragmatically take the responsibility to affirm that, here and today, there are policies that are advantageous or disadvantageous for citizens and for our country, policies that are successful to ensure well-being and a better quality of life for citizens and policies that compromise these objectives. The political forces that integrate the majority of government have been accused of being populist and anti-system. They are linguistic formulas that everyone can freely decline. If populism is the attitude of the ruling class to listen to people's needs, inspired by Dostoevsky's reflections from the pages of Pushkin, if anti-system means to aim to introduce a new system, which removes old privileges and incrustations of power, well, these political forces deserve both these qualifications. But if you want to read carefully the government contract, it emerges that this attention to the needs of citizens is carried out in the high sign of politics, with the P capital letter, with the aim of giving concrete implementation to the founding values of our Constitution. In the contract, alongside more immediate measures, there are also deeper structural reforms. If we want to restore to the action of government a broader horizon of meaning, we must show ourselves capable of looking up, striving to pursue the real needs of citizens in a medium-long-term perspective. Otherwise, politics loses sight of the principal responsibility, which requires acting, as the philosopher Jonas invited to consider, not only looking at the immediate need, which risks turning into mere gain, but also planning the society we want to leave to our children and our grandchildren. Change in the method. The change will not be only in words and style, but above all in the method and in the contents. From the methodological point of view, our initiative will be articulated on three fronts. Listening. Because first of all the needs of the citizens come. In this, of course, the Parliament and the new instruments of direct democracy that the contract intends to introduce will also help us. Running. We want to be pragmatic. If a norm, an institution, or an institute does not work, it is right to abolish it. If it works, it is right to strengthen it. If it is lacking, it is right to create it. Control. The measures we will adopt have objectives to be achieved. We will be the first to monitor their effectiveness with severity and rigor, intervening immediately with the necessary corrections. Listening, execution, control. These will be the three pillars of government action, in the name of full transparency. Change in content. The change, as just anticipated, will also be in the contents. For example, it changes the fact that the government's first concern will be social rights, which over the past few years have been gradually dismantled with the results we know: millions of poor, millions of unemployed, millions of sufferers. It is time to say that Italian citizens have the right to a minimum hourly wage, so that no one is exploited anymore, who are entitled to an income of citizenship and a return to work if they find themselves unemployed, who are entitled to a dignified pension, which they have the right to pay fair fees in a simple manner. Again, we want to reduce the public debt, but we want to do it with the growth of our wealth, not with the austerity measures that, in recent years, have helped to make it rise. The change is in a quick and efficient justice and on the part of citizens, with new tools such as class action, fair compensation for victims of violent crimes, the strengthening of self-defense. It changes that we will end the immigration business, grown out of all proportion under the cloak of fake solidarity. Change that we will fight corruption with innovative methods such as DASPO to the corrupt and with the introduction of the undercover agent. It changes that we want a country that is adapted to disabled citizens, and there are a few millions, that too often find themselves abandoned to themselves and their families. It changes that we want to break the link between politics and health, to make the latter finally efficient throughout the national territory. Change that we will increase funds, assets, and equipment to guarantee security in every city. Change that we will pay adequate attention to families, especially those in need. I recalled only a few parts of the contract, but even if we were to realize only the innovations I have just outlined, citizens would immediately perceive that the new wind did not blow in vain. They would sense that the wind of change is blowing everywhere, in big cities and in small towns. They would perceive that their quality of life has improved and they would feel even more united and proud to live in our beautiful country. This is ultimately our goal. On some specific themes, I will not dwell in detail to illustrate all the individual objectives that we have laid at the foundation of this government action and which are indicated in the contract. Below, however, I will summarize some indications on some more relevant topics and I will also anticipate in which direction my personal and more specific contribution will be made. Work. In this time of crisis and difficulty we are committed to giving substance to the provision contained in the first article of our Constitution, which establishes the Republic on Labor. We want to build a new transparent and fair social pact, based on solidarity but also on commitment, aware that only with everyone's participation in the development of the country can we guarantee a future of prosperity for our children. We want to give voice to the many young people who cannot find work, to those who are forced to move abroad and to those who remain inactive here, who shut themselves up and become discouraged. In one case as in the other we end up dissipating precious resources of our country. We want to give voice to the many women, often more educated and tenacious than men, and that in the workplace they are still unacceptably discriminated and less paid, and that they feel alone when they decide to give birth to a child. The diffusion of new technologies and the sharing economy creates new business opportunities and makes innovative services available to citizens, but also opens up risks of marginalization and new forms of exploitation. We must take responsibility for these transformations, not to combat development for many irreversible verses, but to ensure in any case respect for the essential rights of workers and to ensure that work is always an instrument of personal and human fulfillment. Environment. Government action will be constantly focused on the protection of the environment, on the hydrogeological safety of our territory, on the development of the circular economy. With our political choices we will work to anticipate the processes, already in progress, of decarbonization of our production system. We do not want to passively assist the evolution of the reality that surrounds us, perhaps following the particular interests of individual economic actors, but we are committed to governing these processes open to technological innovation, in the name of development at the service of man. We want to claim, even in this field, the high role of politics, which is capable of guiding and governing changes in social, economic, and cultural reality. We are not available to sacrifice the environment and the blue economy project for other purposes. We must immediately measure ourselves with the dilemmas of artificial intelligence and use big data to capture all the possibilities of the sharing economy. International scenarios, markets, and security. We intend first to reaffirm the convinced belonging of our country to the Atlantic Alliance, with the United States of America as a privileged ally. We will be supporters of an openness to Russia, which has consolidated its international role in various geopolitical crises in recent years. We will promote a review of the sanctions system, starting with those that risk mortifying Russian civil society. As is known, the processes of integration of the markets that have taken place in recent years have made a complete redefinition of the relationship between politics, law, economy. In the new global space, the economy or, better still, Finance has conquered a position of preeminence, it has become, as noted by Hillman, the true universal religion of our time. Politics, but also law, have lost ground. We have difficulty pursuing strong and consistent political actions, as well as achieving effective and harmonious legal disciplines. Politics, in particular, is struggling to govern such complex and integrated social and economic processes. But the answer is not to deny the difficulties. We must find a way to strengthen, within supranational structures, the processes of democratic legitimacy, strengthening the institutions that represent the will of the peoples. Europe. The elimination of the growth gap between Italy and the European Union is our goal, which must be pursued in a framework of financial stability and market confidence. Italian public debt is fully sustainable today, however, its reduction must be pursued, but with a view to economic growth. The fiscal and public spending policy should be oriented towards the pursuit of the objectives set for stable and sustainable growth. In Europe, these issues will be strongly brought forward for an adaptation of its governance, an adjustment already at the center of the reflection and discussion of all the member countries of the Union. We are optimistic about the outcome of these reflections and confident of our negotiating power, because we are facing a situation in which Italy's interests, at this stage of European construction, coincide with the general interests of Europe and with the objective of prevent its possible decline. Europe is our home. As a founding country, we have the full title to claim a stronger and even more equitable Europe, in which the economic and monetary union is oriented to protect the needs of its citizens, in order to more effectively balance the principles of responsibility and solidarity. Political privileges. In the years that are closer to us, we have seen a reduction in public investment and a reduction in basic services. However, the privileges of politics and its waste have remained intact. This government intends to act decisively. The fight against the privileges of politics and waste is not merely a symbolic matter. If ordinary citizens face daily 1,000 difficulties and humiliations because they do not have a job, have a pension below the threshold of dignity, work earning a derisory salary, it is not tolerable that the political class does not draw the due consequences and order economic treatment. Otherwise, the Citizens' Trust Pact is broken against their institutions. There is a need to cut the pensions and annuities of parliamentarians, regional councillors, and employees of constitutional bodies, by introducing for them the pension system of normal pensioners. The so-called golden pensions are another example of unjustified privilege that must be opposed. We will intervene on checks exceeding €5,000 per month in the part not covered by the contributions paid. We will operate savings in all possible locations, and I am convinced that we will cut large margins of intervention and will achieve significant results. Justice. In this matter, our goal is to rebuild the relationship of trust of citizens towards the justice system. More recently, there has been a decline in judicial protection initiatives. In reality, the demand for justice has not failed, but rather the processes cost too much and last for too long. This applies to citizens and businesses, with the consequence that the low efficiency of the justice service is proving to be a limit to economic growth and a deterrent to foreign investors. In the contemporary economy, as sociologist Ulrich Beck recalls, the real danger is the threat of non-invasion by investors, or their departure. In the government contracts, some specific objectives are indicated: the simplification and the reduction of the processes, the lowering of the access costs to the justice, the strengthening of the guarantees of protection of the rights and interests of the citizens. We will tighten penalties for the crime of sexual violence in addition to fair compensation for the victims. We will ensure certainty of punishment to prevent honest citizens from losing faith in justice. Where necessary, we will increase the number of prisons also in order to ensure better conditions for the detained persons, without prejudice to the constitutionally provided rehabilitation function for the sentence, which requires the identification of adequate training and work paths. We will also reform the prescription, which must be returned to its original function, no longer reduced to a mere expedient to escape the due process. Contrast of corruption and criminal powers. We will strengthen strategies to combat corruption and criminal powers. We will contrast the corruption that creeps into all the interstices of public activities, alters the level playing field among entrepreneurs, degrades the prestige of public functions. We will increase penalties for crimes against the public administration, with the introduction of the DASPO for corrupt and corrupting. We will strengthen the action of undercover agents, in line with the Merida Convention. Those who, from their workplace, be it private or public, will denounce the criminal behavior carried out within their offices will be more protected. We will fight the mafias with every means, attacking their finances, their economies, and hitting the networks of relationships that allow criminal organizations to become pervasive within the socio-economic fabric. Conflict of interest. The conflict of interests is a worm that undermines our economic social system to its roots, and prevents its development taking place in accordance with the law and according to the rules of free competition. Subjects who are institutionally invested with the objective of pursuing collective interests, and who should take their initiatives to an impartial logic, in reality, are often surprised to pursue their personal self-interest. We will strengthen the current legislation so as to extend the hypotheses of conflict to include any useful, even indirect, that the agent can derive from his position or his own initiative. In addition, safeguards to prevent the occurrence of potential conflicts of interest must be strengthened. Income and citizenship pension. Even in Italy, as in other countries, inequalities have worsened and poverty has multiplied. Those who live in conditions of socio-economic distress are precluded from the possibility of fully developing their personality and participating effectively in the political, economic, and social organization of our country, as foreseen by the second paragraph of Article 3 of our Constitution. The government's goal is to provide income support for the families most affected by socio-economic hardship. The benefit will be commensurate with the composition of the family unit and will be conditional on vocational training and work reintegration. We propose, in a first phase, to strengthen the employment centers, in order to stimulate the meeting between supply and demand of work with the maximum efficiency and speed possible. In the second phase, the actual financial support will be dispersed. We will also take action to help pensioners who do not have enough income to live in a dignified manner, by introducing a citizenship pension. Immigration. A first test of the new way in which we want to dialogue with European partners is certainly the immigration discipline. It is clear to all that the management of the migratory flows carried out so far has been a failure. Europe has allowed selfish closures of many member states that have ended up downloading on the border states, and above all on our country, the burdens and difficulties which instead should have been shared. For this reason we will strongly demand the overcoming of the Dublin regulation in order to achieve effective compliance with the principle of fair sharing of responsibilities and to implement automatic systems for the compulsory relocation of asylum seekers. From the very first, a positive conversation I had with Chancellor Angela Merkel, I stressed the importance of this theme, and the subsequent statements made by the same during the last weekend show how full awareness is being asserted that Italy cannot be left behind alone in the face of these challenges. We are not and we will never be racist. We want the procedures aimed at ascertaining the status of refugees to be certain and quick, also in order to guarantee their rights more effectively. We defend immigrants who arrive regularly on our territory, work, and become part of our communities, respecting their laws and making a decisive contribution to development. But to guarantee its indispensable integration, we must not only fight with stern determination the most odious forms of exploitation linked to the trafficking of human beings, perpetrated by unscrupulous smugglers, but also reorganize and make efficient the reception system, ensuring transparency on the use of public funds and eliminating all forms of infiltration of organized crime. If the legal requirements for their stay are not met, we will work to make the return procedures effective, and we will do our best to ensure that all third countries that want to make cooperation agreements with a member state of the Union access to the European Union. Signing of bilateral migration management agreements. A reflection deserves the tragic and disquieting event occurred a few days ago. Sacco Sumela was shot dead. He was one of 1,000 laborers, with a regular residence permit, who every day in this country go to work in conditions that fall below the threshold of dignity. Our heart is moved to him and his family. But this is not enough. Politics must take responsibility for the drama of these people and ensure legality roots, which constitute the polar star of this government program. Tax reform. Our tax system is dated and no longer reflects the current socio-economic reality. Large corporations, operating in the transactional space, manage to hide their wealth in artificial paradises, while small businesses and small taxpayers remain crushed by high fiscal pressure. Koestler is right, capitalism needs to be rethought. In the meantime, we intend to introduce revolutionary measures that lead to an integral review of the tax system of income for individuals and businesses. Our fiscal pressure, combined with an excess of bureaucracy, in fact, negatively affects the quality of the tax relationship between the state and taxpayers, as well as the competitiveness of our country. The objective is the flat tax, that is a tax reform characterized by the introduction of fixed rates, with a system of deductions that can guarantee the progressivity of the tax, in full harmony with the constitutional principles. Only in this way will it be possible to achieve a drastic reduction in tax avoidance and evasion, with consequent benefits in terms of greater tax savings, greater propensity to consume and investments, and greater tax base. In short, it is necessary to re-establish the relationship between the state and the taxpayers, under the banner of good faith and mutual cooperation between the parties. But a concept must be reiterated here with absolute clarity: the existing administrative and penal sanctions framework must be tightened up in order to ensure the true prison for the great evaders. Scientific research. We are proud that this year 11 young Italian researchers will be awarded in the coming days, some for the second time, with the prestigious recognition, Merit Award 2018 of the Conquer Cancer Foundation, which identifies them among the best in the world for their work done on cancer. However, it is regrettable to note that many of them, like many colleagues who honor each other in the various sectors of scientific research, have been forced to abandon our country to operate in universities and foreign research centers. Our schools and universities are able to form absolute excellences in all sectors, but unfortunately we are not able to keep them in our country, with a deficit that is both cultural and economic. We want to reverse the route, offer the best of our researchers, as well as foreign researchers, to whom we must be attractive, concrete possibilities to continue their activities in our country, thus forming other scientists and together transferring the fruit of their work in our economic and productive fabric. Only through the development of the most advanced and innovative activities can we maintain in Italy the production chains that today constitute the backbone on which our wealth is based, giving a future of development and growth to our children and grandchildren. Health. The document of economy and finance already approved provides for a contraction of health expenditure. It will be the task of this government to reverse this trend to ensure the necessary equity in access to care. The socio-economic differences cannot, should not be discriminating for the protection of health for the citizens of our country. We will pursue greater efficiency in the provision of services, both in terms of volumes, quality, and outcomes of care, and in order to manage the accounts. The government will work in agreement with the regions and the autonomous provinces to implement more effective organizational models, able to guarantee a correct management of the patients, promoting the promotion and prevention of health through the integration of social and health services, beyond that the enhancement of local medicine. We want to reduce waiting times, and we want the top management appointments in the healthcare world to be based on exclusively meritocratic criteria, strictly protected from undue political influences. Internet. The society of tomorrow will be increasingly characterized by the Internet, an infinite public space, which facilitates production and access to knowledge, creates opportunities for innovation, reduces the distance between citizens and places of democracy, and increases the transparency of decision-making processes. However, we are aware that the direction in which this technological progress develops is not neutral. We must ensure that this development direction is fully compatible with the protection of fundamental human rights and with the needs of the community. We need to strengthen certain guarantees, both legal and institutional, in order to allow the definitive affirmation of digital citizenship. Internet access must be guaranteed to all citizens as a fundamental right and a precondition for the effective exercise of democratic rights, in accordance with the second paragraph of Art. 3. Cost. However, it is necessary to ensure a high level of protection of personal data, as there is a virtuous circle between rights protection, use of the network, social inclusion, and economic growth. Subsidiarity in the third sector. Government action will also be sensitive to the principle of subsidiarity, which requires limiting the action of public authorities when the initiative of individuals, single or organized in associative structures, can be more efficient. We are aware that the third sector and all the bodies that crowd it, voluntary associations, social promotion, social cooperation, which pursue solidarity on the international level, offer models of sustainable development, which contribute to creating a solidarity circuit that fosters the fragile and the most needy people. Non-profit initiatives often take place in the spaces of our society where suffering is most intense. They contribute to reducing inequalities, to reinforcing social cohesion, helping to shape a better future. We intend to put in place all measures, including corrective measures, which allow the full realization of an effective reform of the third sector, which is also effective in terms of fiscal impacts. I would like here to recall, in particular, the contribution to improving the quality of life offered by sporting practice and ensured by the experiences of volunteering, through thousands of small amateur sports associations. This is a dimension of the world of sport that we intend to protect and enhance. Businesses and development. We are aware that the revival of our economy goes through the spirit of initiative and the qualities of many small entrepreneurs, professionals, traders, and artisans, who, through 1,000 difficulties, keep up the tradition of commitment and hard work that is one of the most authentic characteristics of our productive fabric, at all levels, in all sectors. We aim to create a favorable context for them, working in such a way that the public administration is not an adversary to be defended against, but an ally with which to cooperate. We will act in such a way as to favor companies that innovate, that hire new staff, that respect the rules of free competition. We intend to promote companies that adopt socially responsible practices, which base their economic initiatives on the precautionary principle, in order to prevent the negative impact of their actions on the environment and to ensure an environment that is suitable to protect workers' rights. We will promote a discipline that fully revises the traditional bankruptcy law, in the name of a much broader approach, which, abandoning purely sanctioning logic, is worthy of disciplining and defining, in an organic way, the phenomenon of the so-called business crisis. Dialogue with the social partners. This government aims to recover in new and more effective forms the social dialogue with the various representative associations of workers and enterprises. We should redefine, on the basis of objective criteria, the principle of representativeness, in full transparency. In this way we will get everyone to be invited, each according to their own sensibilities and skills, to give new impetus to their initiatives, in the awareness that their commitment and their proposals, if inspired by the general interest of the country and the various communities even local, will be appreciated and taken into account. All the multiple positive energies of our country must be restarted chorally. Returning vitality to the industry, especially exporters, to the fabric of countless small and medium-sized businesses in the field of trade, services, and crafts, to authentic cooperatives, to the agricultural world and its supply chains that promote Made in Italy in the world, to transparent banks and to the service of the real economy. Simplification, debureaucratization, digitalization. We will devote much attention to simplification, debureaucratization, and digitization. Summarize only a joke on the subject of public procurement. We must restore momentum to public procurement, which can become a fundamental lever of the country's economic policy, guaranteeing sustainable development and increasing employment. In recent years, this sector is going through a phase of arrest, determined for the most part also by the uncertainties of interpretation and certain rigidities generated by the new Code of Public Contracts. We must overcome formalism as an end in itself which still largely dominates procurement discipline, since form cannot be mistaken for legality. Too often formally perfect tenders conceal corruption and do not prevent bad execution. We must ensure strict compliance with the delivery times of the works but also the quality of the work and supplies and the efficiency of the services. On the system of voting abroad and on the protection of regions with special autonomy. The government will pay due attention also to the legitimate requests that will come from parliamentarians elected abroad. We have already begun to meditate on the criticalities of the voting system abroad and on the need to introduce appropriate measures to prevent the risk that the vote be accompanied by fraud. We will work to safeguard the regions with special autonomy, in the north and south of the country, in the belief that proximity, subsidiarity, and responsibility, where locally concentrated, can contribute to improving the quality of life of our citizens. On the centrality of Parliament and on opposition parliamentary groups. A specific consideration I address to the parliamentary groups that will place themselves in opposition. This government is not an expression of your feeling, but also opens to your evaluations. In respect of the roles, if you confirm not to support this government initiative, I ask you, however, to exercise your opposition prerogatives in a constructive and loyal way. Institutions are not the assets of a single political force but are the home of all Italians and mark the quality of our legal system and our civil life. An even firm but loyal and constructive opposition is the salt of political dialectics and serves for the proper functioning of the parliamentary institution and of the whole democratic system. Also, in order to honor the centrality of Parliament, I anticipate from now on that it is my intention to apply the institute of questions for immediate response, in accordance with the provisions of the Chamber and the Senate. In this way, we will be able to constantly confront each other, and through your mediation I will be allowed to speak with the citizens you represent. The presence of the government in the halls and in the parliamentary commissions will also be assured, with force, by all the ministers, who, according to their respective competences, will answer your questions. Personally, I commit myself to respect the dissenting opinions and the contrary assessments that will arise from these benches, and to convey also within the government structure the positions that will return useful to offer greater solidity and effectiveness to the actions of the government. We will also be available to evaluate, during the course of work, the contribution of parliamentary groups that will want to share our journey and, if necessary, to join the government contract, offering a more stable contribution to the realization of our program. I dedicate a final thought to the earthquake victims. My first public release, in Italy, will be dedicated to them. I came to the end of my speech. The people expressed themselves and asked for change. Now the word is up to you. Your vote today will be part of the history of the country. Thank you all.